The city sprawled beneath the dusky sky like a tapestry of lights, ambition, and longing. In the heart of it all stood Will Carrington, a man of staggering wealth, real estate magnate, art collector, and public philanthropist. His days were governed by the rhythm of high-stakes deals, gala dinners, and opulent soirees. Yet that evening, something tugged at the edges of his carefully ordered existence. As Will exited his limousine, he caught sight of a trembling figure huddled on the sidewalk. A woman, gaunt, disheveled, her clothes hanging off thin shoulders. She held out a trembling hand, whispered a plea. "Please, anything will help." Nothing in Will's world had prepared him for that moment of raw vulnerability. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $350 bill, enough to change a life, or so he hoped, and pressed it into her hand. Her eyes, brimming with shock and gratitude, held his for a heartbeat before she sank her head. She didn't say thank you. Words felt too small for what had just passed between them. Inside the stone facade of his mansion, Will couldn't focus. His longtime assistant, Helena, demanded updates, board meeting, charity dinners, new acquisitions. But he drifted, thinking of the woman on the street. Did she have a name? A story? Guilt and curiosity warred inside him. He tossed restlessly in bed, haunted by that one fleeting connection. A quiet confession whispered through his mind. He longed, though he'd never admit it out loud, for something more than wealth. He craved purpose. He craved meaning. Yet on this night, he only allowed himself to hope. Will awoke the next morning to the muted toll of a grandfather clock and sunlight slicing through velvet drapes. He showered, changed, and readied himself for another day of grandeur. But his mind drifted again, to the woman, street corners, desperation, and that fleeting warmth in her eyes. He decided, almost on impulse, to return to the same block. The city bustled, indifferent to his noble intentions. He retraced his steps, passing through throngs of commuters. And there, across the street from a memorial garden devoted to an elegant marble tomb, she sat again. No sign of gratitude or recognition, only that same faraway look in her eyes. Confusion tangled his thoughts. He approached her cautiously. "I gave you something yesterday," he began. "Do you remember?" She didn't reply. Instead, she turned to gaze at the memorial garden, where white lilies framed a simple, engraved name and a date. His lover's. Caroline Aldrich, taken too soon, 23 years ago today. Time stopped. Memories flooded. That first electric conversation in a rain-slicked bookstore. Her laugh like chimes in a quiet meadow. Their plans for a future they never had. He'd buried her grief beneath business conquests and philanthropic facades. The beggar. She wasn't a beggar. She was Caroline. But Caroline had been gone 23 years. The world tilted. The woman sat still, her thin frame silhouetted against the soft marble of the grave behind her. Will's pulse thudded in his ears as he took slow steps closer. It wasn't just a passing resemblance. It wasn't a trick of light. Her profile, the slope of her cheek, the way her lashes kissed her cheekbones, mirrored Caroline's so vividly it made his chest ache. But no, Caroline was dead. He had buried her himself, stood in the rain with fists clenched and soul shattered. This woman couldn't be her. Yet here she was, perched at Caroline's grave like a mourner who never left. I don't understand," he said, voice low and cracking. "Why are you here?" She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the headstone. "She used to sing on the 6th Street corner," she whispered, her voice raspy and worn. "People never noticed her. But I did." Will blinked. "You knew her?" The woman finally turned. Her eyes were a faded gray, not Caroline's warm hazel, but ancient, haunted. "Knew of her," she said. "I was there the night she collapsed. No one else saw." A wave of nausea surged through Will. "What do you mean, collapsed?" "Caroline died in a car crash. I got the call." She tilted her head. "You got the call. But do you know who made it?" Will stared at her, trying to read the truth behind her battered exterior. She looked old beyond her years, not from age, but from a life weighed down by sorrow. He tried to find logic, some sanity in the moment. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Her shadow," she said. "Her mistake. Her protector, maybe. I don't even know anymore." She stood, slowly, like her body ached with each movement. "You gave me money yesterday. But I don't need money. I needed to see if you'd remember. If you still came here." Will's breath caught in his throat. I haven't been here in 15 years. She nodded, unsurprised. That's what I thought. Suddenly she reached into her coat, pulling out a small, folded photograph. She handed it to him without a word. He unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was a picture of Caroline, but not from any photo he'd ever seen. Her face was gaunt, eyes hollow, cheeks sunken. She was holding a child, a little girl with curly black hair. Will staggered. What is this? Where did you get this? She looked at him with something between pity and fury. From the past you never asked about. And with that, she turned and began to walk away, disappearing into the crowd like a ghost returning to fog. Will stood alone at the grave of a woman he had loved, holding proof of a life he never knew she'd lived. A child. A lie. A second death. Will Carrington stood frozen in place, the photograph trembling between his fingers. Caroline, frail, tired, clutching a child. He couldn't tear his eyes from the image. He knew every contour of her face, every glimmer in her smile. But here, she looked different. Not sick exactly, just worn down, like a candle that had burned too brightly for too long. The child in the photo, no more than 2 or 3, had Will's nose. His eyes. The thought sent a jolt through his chest. Was it possible? He turned, hoping to chase the woman down, but she had vanished into the flow of foot traffic like vapor. For the first time in decades, the billionaire felt powerless. He crumpled onto the cold marble bench beside the grave, unable to breathe past the storm rising inside him. By that evening, Will had torn through the archives of his own memories, timelines, and Caroline's obituary. The story he'd always accepted: fatal car accident, solo crash, no passengers, body identified by dental records, began to feel incomplete. Sanitized. He summoned his most trusted investigator, Mark Delaney, a former federal agent now on Will's private payroll. The man was discreet, brilliant, and loyal to a fault. I need you to dig into Caroline Aldridge's death, Will said. Autopsy, crash reports, witness statements. Everything. Something doesn't add up. Mark raised an eyebrow. You're reopening her file? After 23 years? Will handed him the photograph. Mark examined it silently. His expression changed. This isn't from the public record. Where did you get it? I don't know who she is, Will said. But she gave me this at Caroline's grave. I think the girl might be mine. Mark didn't blink. I'll get you answers. The next morning, Will woke early, restless. He avoided the office, ignored his calls. Instead, he drove through the city streets without destination until he ended up at the corner of 6th Street, the place where the mystery woman had said Caroline used to sing. The sidewalk was cracked and stained, but an old metal pole stood where a streetlight had once buzzed, and Will could almost hear her voice again. Sweet, soft, singing Etta James to passing strangers who never paid attention, except him. His phone buzzed. Mark, I pulled the original crash report. Something's off. There's no mention of Caroline's belongings being recovered. No purse, no phone, no ID, just a burned license plate and dental confirmation. Will frowned. That's standard for a car fire, isn't it? Maybe, Mark said carefully. But there's more. I cross-referenced the time of death with hospital records from a nearby ER. An unidentified woman was admitted that night. She survived for 2 days and then vanished. Vanished. No transfer, no discharge. Just gone. And the attending physician? Died a year later. Heart attack. No next of kin. Will felt the cold crawl up his spine. What are you saying? I'm saying, Mark said, I don't think Caroline died in that crash. Will's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. And if that's true, Mark added, then someone wanted you to believe she did. The rain began as a drizzle, barely whispering against the windshield of Will's Bentley, but soon thickened into a steady downpour that blurred the city into gray streaks. He didn't drive. He just sat there, letting the storm soak his thoughts. Caroline might have survived. And if so, why didn't she come back? The question swirled, but one thing cut through like a blade. Someone had lied to him. Someone had stolen her away. He returned home to his penthouse and stared at the photo again. The child, curly-haired, eyes full of fire and defiance even in toddlerhood, had to be his. It was as if fate had handed him a thread, daring him to pull. That night, Mark called again. His tone was sharper. I ran facial recognition on the woman who gave you the photo. Will stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, the city glittering beneath him. She's listed as Evelyn Pierce, 48 years old, former psychiatric nurse. No criminal record, but get this. She worked at a private rehab clinic in Vermont from 2001 to 2003. Will's heart skipped. And Caroline? There's no admission file under her name. But, Mark paused. There is a Jane Doe admitted in late 2001 who stayed nearly 9 months. Same height, same birthmark on the collarbone. Will felt like the floor beneath him tilted. They changed her identity, he whispered. Institutionalized her. Mark's voice lowered. I think someone paid to keep her hidden. My guess? Family. Will scoffed. She had no family. Just a stepbrother she hadn't spoken to in years. Well, that stepbrother, Lucas Aldrich, started a security firm in 2000. Guess who owns the building where that Vermont clinic was housed? Will's mouth went dry. Lucas. Mark confirmed it. The next morning, Will made the decision. He flew to Vermont in his private jet and drove to the now-defunct clinic, which had shuttered 2 decades prior. Overgrown vines strangled the gate. Windows were boarded. The air reeked of abandonment and secrets. Inside, dust and mildew coated every surface. Files were long cleared out, but in a forgotten drawer, behind a panel, he found what he hadn't dared to hope for. A faded medical intake form. No name, just initials, C.A. The box for next of kin was blank. But under notes, scribbled in a nurse's hand. Patient shows signs of post-traumatic stress. Refuses to discuss child. Requests contact with Will C. Repeatedly. Request denied. Will sat down on the peeling linoleum floor, the file cradled in his hands. She had tried to reach him. She'd asked for him, begged for him, and someone made sure he never knew. Later that night, back at the hotel, his phone buzzed again. A text from Mark. Found the girl. Name's Lena Pierce. Lives in Portland. She's 22. And Will, she's yours. Will Carrington stared at the message like it might disappear if he blinked. Lena Pierce. 22. Yours. A daughter. His daughter. His heart pounded. Not with joy. Not yet. But with a cocktail of disbelief, fear, and something dangerously close to hope. 23 years ago, Caroline had vanished from his world. Now he learned she'd lived and given birth to a piece of him. A piece he'd never held, never protected, never even known about. And now she was out there. The flight to Portland felt longer than any cross-continental deal Will had ever brokered. He didn't tell Mark he was coming. He needed this to be private. Real. He needed to see her face with his own eyes. He arrived in the early morning and rented a plain black SUV. No driver. No security. No trace of the billionaire behind the wheel. He drove through quiet neighborhoods, each turn taking him closer to a truth he didn't know how to handle. Mark's dossier had been thorough. Lena Pierce, senior at Portland State University, studying criminal psychology. Worked part-time at a vintage record shop. No criminal record. No known ties to Caroline's remaining family. Lived alone in a tiny apartment above a laundromat on Foster Road. Will parked across the street, heart racing. And then he saw her. She stepped out of the building, hair in a loose ponytail, earbuds in. Tall. Graceful. She wore a worn green jacket and ripped jeans. And when she glanced both ways to cross the street, the morning sun caught her face. And for a breathless second, he saw Caroline again. Not the fragile woman from the photo, but the one he danced with barefoot in the kitchen at 2 a.m. Will felt tears sting his eyes. This was real. He got out of the car, slowly, unsure, terrified. Lena, he called. She paused, turned, pulled out one earbud. Yeah. The way she looked at him, casual, polite, curious, made his stomach twist. She had no idea who he was. I'm sorry, he stammered. Are you Lena Pierce? Her expression shifted slightly. Who's asking? He took a breath, every cell in his body screaming with panic and longing. My name is Will Carrington. I knew your mother. Something flickered in her eyes. A shadow. A barrier slamming down behind them. My mother's dead, she said flatly. Will nodded. I know. I loved her. Lena tilted her head. You said knew. Not loved. I still love her, he said softly. She hesitated, then looked around, perhaps out of instinct, perhaps fear. Why are you here? He swallowed hard. Because I just found out you exist. And I think I'm your father. Silence. She stared at him, as if waiting for a punchline. Then she laughed once, cold and sharp. Right. Okay, Dad. What do you want? A hug? Forgiveness? No, he said quickly. I want the truth. And maybe if you'll let me. I want to know you. Lena's eyes narrowed. My mom died alone in a shelter, she said. She had nothing. No one. So if you were out there, some rich, caring father, where the hell were you? Will's throat closed. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Lena stared at him for a long, painful beat. And then, without a word, she turned and walked away. Will stood motionless as Lena disappeared around the corner, her silhouette shrinking with every step. The sting of her rejection wasn't surprising, it was deserved. But it still tore something open inside him that he hadn't known was still raw. She was angry, rightfully so, raised in the shadows of a life she never chose, a mother broken by secrets, and a father who hadn't even known she existed. And now he had to decide, leave her be, or fight for a second chance neither of them asked for. That evening, back at his hotel, Will spread every document Mark had found across the bed. Medical reports, photos, clinic notes, the intake form, and tucked at the bottom, something he hadn't noticed before, a short letter, handwritten and signed. It read, "If she ever finds him, tell him I tried. I tried to keep her safe. I tried to keep myself sane. But I was erased before I could make it right. If he's reading this, tell him I'm sorry I didn't fight harder." Will ran his fingers over the ink, the loopy curves of Caroline's unmistakable handwriting. She hadn't forgotten him. She hadn't abandoned their daughter. She'd been erased, institutionalized, silenced, hidden away by someone who had the power to make people disappear. Lucas. Will met Mark the next morning in a Portland cafe, low-key and unassuming. He slid the letter across the table. "Caroline wrote this," he said, "before she died." Mark studied it. "We were right. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. This was a cover-up." "Lucas," Will growled. "He's still alive," Mark said. "Living in Maine. Changed his name to Ethan Price." Will's jaw tightened. "Then I want to see him." Mark hesitated. "He won't talk. He has lawyers. Walls. But there's one more thing. Caroline had a journal. Or at least, she used to. She wrote in it almost daily when she was at the clinic. If we can find it." Will sat up straighter. "Where is it?" "No idea. It disappeared after she left the facility. But Evelyn, the woman you met, she might know." Will nodded slowly. "Then I need to find her again." He went back to the cemetery first, where this had all started. The sky was overcast again, as if the past 23 years still hung like a storm over everything. He waited, and as if summoned by memory or fate, Evelyn appeared. Same coat, same weathered face. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "You found her," she said. "Yes," Will replied. "She hates me." "She doesn't hate you," Evelyn said, sitting beside him. "She hates what life did to her mother, and what life refused to give her." "I need the journal," Will said. "Caroline's." Evelyn looked away, eyes misting. "I burned it," she whispered. Will's heart sank. "But not before I copied it," she added, pulling a USB drive from her pocket. "I always knew you'd come looking." Will took it, hands trembling. "Why did you help her?" he asked softly. Evelyn smiled sadly. "Because once upon a time, she helped me, when no one else even saw I existed." Will Carrington stared at the USB drive in his palm as if it were sacred. Somewhere in that tiny piece of plastic and metal lay Caroline's voice, her thoughts, her truth, possibly even her pain. The words he'd never heard, the confessions he'd never been given. Back in his hotel room, he sat at the desk, laptop open. The files loaded slowly, as if reluctant to reveal themselves. Dozens of entries, each stamped with a date and time. The first entry was from late 2001, 3 months after her supposed death. He clicked. October 12th, 2001. "I should be dead. They told Will I was. Lucas made sure of it. But I woke up in a clinic with no name, no rights, and a child growing inside me. I'm scared. Not of being alone, of being forgotten." Will leaned back, chest tight. It was real. Every fear he'd ever had about losing her, she had felt it tenfold. December 3rd, 2001. "Her name will be Lena. I don't care what they tell me. She'll have his eyes. I dream of him every night. Sometimes I think I can hear him calling my name. But no one answers." May 9th, 2002. "They took her from me the day after she was born. Said I was unstable. I screamed until my voice went. Evelyn was the only one who helped me. She smuggled in a photo of Lena. She gave me crayons and a pen when the staff weren't watching. She believed me. She said one day she'd find Will. I hope she does. Will's hands shook as he scrolled through more, some entries hopeful, others descending into quiet despair. Caroline had fought with everything she had, but the system, Lucas, and time had buried her voice. Until now. Hours passed as he read. Night fell, and still he stayed hunched over the laptop. By dawn, he reached the final entry. June 27th, 2003. I don't know how long I have. They're transferring me somewhere else. Somewhere worse. Evelyn says she'll hide this journal, and one day, he'll find it. I hope he knows I never stopped loving him. And if he meets Lena, tell her I sang to her, every night, even when she wasn't in my arms. Will closed the laptop and wept. For Caroline. For Lena. For every lost moment. He returned to Lena's apartment the next day, but didn't approach. He simply waited until she stepped outside again. She spotted him instantly, and this time, instead of cold anger, there was wary curiosity in her eyes. You're back, she said, crossing her arms. Will nodded. I read her journal. Caroline's. Lena blinked. That name still did something to her. She looked down. She never talked about the past. She tried, Will said gently. She fought to reach me. She wrote about you. Sang to you. Missed you. She was taken from us. Lena's voice cracked. She died in a shelter. Cold. Alone. Will reached into his coat and handed her a small photo he had printed from the journal files. Caroline, holding Lena, eyes swollen from tears, but smiling. She never stopped loving you. Lena stared at the photo for a long time. Why are you really here? She whispered. Will's voice was firm now. Because I couldn't save her. But maybe, I can still be there for you. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. And for the first time, she didn't walk away. The cafe was quiet, its morning crowd still hours away. Will and Lena sat across from each other, a steaming mug of coffee untouched between them. The silence wasn't hostile this time, just heavy, like two people staring across a canyon, unsure of how to build a bridge. She used to hum when she washed dishes, Lena said quietly, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Always the same song. Something old, sad, but beautiful. Will nodded. She used to hum when she painted. Sometimes the same tune. Etta James. Lena blinked. Yeah, that was it. A fragile thread of connection formed between them, not enough to erase years of loss, but enough to build a start. She was scared, Will said, but she never gave up on you. Lena gave a small, sad laugh. She gave up on herself. No, he said gently. She was forced to. By Lucas. Lena stiffened. I don't remember him well. Just glimpses. But my mom hated him. Will's jaw clenched. He staged her death. Hid her away. Took you from her. Why? She asked. Why would anyone do that? Control, Will said. Lucas thought I was a threat. To his influence, to Caroline's future, maybe even to money. He decided I didn't deserve her, and that she didn't deserve freedom. Lena's eyes turned hard. And now he gets to live quietly somewhere while she's buried under a fake name? Will's silence was answer enough. That evening, Will made a call. Mark, he said, voice tight. I want him exposed. Mark didn't hesitate. I've already started. His real name. Fake businesses. The Vermont facility. It's all traceable. Once we're ready, we'll release everything. No NDA. No settlement. Good, Will said. He stole decades. Let the world watch him burn. 2 days later, Will and Lena flew to New York. He didn't use his jet. They flew commercial, quiet, and unnoticed. Lena watched him with curiosity, surprised by how humble he seemed beneath all the money and power. She didn't trust him yet, not entirely. But she was starting to see the cracks in the perfect billionaire exterior. A man who had lost more than anyone knew. A man trying, clumsily, to do right. When they arrived, they took a car straight to Hillside Memorial Park, the cemetery where Caroline's gravestone lay. Will had called ahead. A new headstone stood in its place now, one with her full name, and a new inscription. Caroline Aldridge Carrington. Beloved mother, artist, singer, fighter. The truth could not bury her. She lives on in light. Lena knelt before it, tears slipping down her face. She deserves this, she whispered. Will stood behind her, hands trembling. And so do you. As they walked back to the car, Lena stopped. What happens now? Will looked at her. Now, we take back everything that was stolen. She nodded once. And for the first time, she smiled. Lucas Aldrich, or rather, Ethan Price, as he now called himself, had built his life in quiet luxury. A sprawling estate in Maine, a shell company network shielding his wealth, and enough favors in political and medical circles to keep his past buried deep. Or so he believed. That illusion shattered when the story broke. Will had leaked everything: the falsified death certificate, the forged clinic records, Evelyn's testimony, and most damning of all, Caroline's journal entries, scanned and authenticated. The headlines exploded. Billionaire's former lover declared dead, found to have been silenced by her own family. Real estate mogul seeks justice for lost daughter and betrayed love. Lucas's name was dragged into daylight like a roach under a lamp. And Lena? She watched it all unfold with a mix of horror and catharsis. Her mother's story was no longer just whispers between her and Evelyn. It was truth, loud and public. Caroline's voice had finally broken through the silence. Meanwhile, Lucas retreated behind lawyers and PR teams, denying everything. But Mark wasn't done. He uncovered a paper trail Lucas had been arrogant enough to leave behind. Payments to the Vermont facility under aliases, wire transfers to doctors, and signatures linking him directly to the Jane Doe file. It wasn't just scandal anymore. It was criminal. Lena and Will watched the press conference together. The district attorney stood before a sea of microphones. "We are opening a formal investigation into Lucas Aldrich, also known as Ethan Price, for charges including fraud, unlawful psychiatric commitment, and conspiracy to commit identity falsification." Will looked over at Lena, who sat stiffly on the couch, arms crossed. "He'll go to prison," he said, "and your mother will be remembered the way she deserves." Lena didn't answer right away. "Then, this doesn't fix it. It doesn't give me back birthdays or lullabies or her hand in mine." "I know," Will said quietly, "but it gives her justice." He nodded. "And you? It gives you the chance to build forward." Later that night, Will stood on his penthouse balcony, the city lights below flickering like stars. Lena joined him, sipping tea. "You ever think," she said, "about how close this came to staying buried?" "All the time." She looked at him. "I didn't ask to know you. I didn't ask to lose 23 years of your life." They stood in silence, not as father and daughter yet, not fully, but as survivors of a story written without their consent. Then Lena broke the quiet. "I'm not ready to call you Dad, but I don't hate you." Will smiled faintly. "That's more than I deserve." She glanced over at him. "But maybe not more than you've earned." 1 year later, autumn had returned to New York City, golden leaves spiraling through Central Park like memories on the wind. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and the world, though still imperfect, felt a little more honest. Will Carrington walked alone toward the memorial garden where Caroline's new headstone stood. He held two things: a bouquet of white lilies and a framed photograph, the one from Caroline's journal, now restored, cleaned, and placed in a silver frame. He knelt, placed the flowers, and whispered, "She found me, Caro, your little girl, and she's stronger than either of us ever were." The leaves rustled in the trees, and for a moment, he swore he felt her, not as a ghost, but as warmth, a presence. Later that afternoon, Will met Lena at her graduation. She stood tall in her green robe, black curls bouncing as she laughed with friends. She spotted him and waved, her smile hesitant but genuine. They had come far. They didn't speak every day. They still had awkward silences and unfinished conversations. But they were rebuilding, slowly, deliberately, and Will had learned not to rush it. Lena approached, diploma in hand. He smiled. "You did it." She smirked. "Top 10%. Just barely." "Your mother would have been proud." Her eyes softened. "I know." They stood there, neither sure what came next. Then Lena surprised him. "Want to get lunch?" she asked. "I found this little place near campus. No press, no suits, just food." Will blinked. "I'd like that." They walked side by side, a little awkward, a little hopeful. Across the country, Lucas Aldrich sat behind thick glass in a federal prison. His appeals had failed. The evidence had been overwhelming. No one visited him, not even his lawyers. The man who had tried to erase a woman's life now had no one to remember his. Justice had come. Quietly. Completely. Back in Portland, Evelyn Pierce opened her mailbox to find a small package. Inside was a handwritten letter from Lena, and a check, enough to buy a home, settle debts, live comfortably for the rest of her life. Beneath the check was a note. For protecting my mother's voice when no one else would. You are family. Evelyn wept. And in Will's home, a painting hung above the fireplace. One of Caroline's last works, unearthed from storage after all these years. It was abstract, bold strokes of blue and gold and stormy gray, but at its center was a single, brilliant beam of light. Will would look at it each morning and remember that even in silence, some voices still find their way back. And that love, no matter how lost, leaves echoes strong enough to be heard again.